So welcome to today's lesson where we're going to be discussing a simple calculation for the free water clearance, which is basically going to tell us how much water comprises a person's urine output. And this is an important calculation in those patients who have problems with water balance, patients who have, for example, SIADH or primary polydipsia. We need to know how much of their urine is water, because any amount above that, if drunk by the patient, will cause some type of symptomatic hyponatremia. And to understand free water clearance and to calculate it, we're going to come up with a simple model that I call the lead pipe model. Now this model can be termed in a number of ways, and it may not be the lead pipe model in any book that you read, but it seems to work for me, so I'm going to describe it to you. The circle here is your glomerulus, and the pipe here is your lead pipe. And it's called a lead pipe because a couple of assumptions have to be made. And the first is that no sodium is absorbed from this pipe, and no sodium is secreted into this pipe. So you've got a pipe here that doesn't allow for sodium to enter or exit. In other words, whatever sodium you start out with here is a sodium that you're going to end up with here. And this concept is the foundation for the free water clearance, at least this simple free water clearance equation that we're going to go through. So we know that this is not true. We know sodium is absorbed and sometimes it's secreted in very few cases, but we're going to make these two assumptions here in order to calculate the free water clearance. So if we know that the sodium at this point is equal to the sodium at this point, let's try to mathematically define the sodium at these 2 points. So we'll call this point 1 and we'll call this point 2. And so let's go up here and let's talk about point 1. So the sodium at point 1 is going to be the concentration of sodium in the serum times the amount of fluid that crosses the membrane. We'll call that A. What about the sodium at point 2? Well, that's the concentration of sodium in the urine times the amount of urine the patient makes, the urine output. So we know that these two equations are the same or equal to each other. We know that x1 is going to have to equal to x2 because of the assumptions that we made down here. So let's put these two together. Let's get some more screen and let's put these two together. So we know x1 is going to equal x2. And we know x1 is this. And we know x2 is this. Alright, so which of these quantities do we know and which don't we know? We know the serum concentration of sodium, we can measure that. We know the concentration of sodium in the urine because we can measure that. And we know the urine output because we just asked the patient, how much urine do you make over a specified period of time? So what we don't know is A. Now it turns out that A is not the free water clearance. This is not equal to the free water clearance. A represents volume, because A, let me graphically represent that for you, is this. Here's our lead pipe, and A represents the fluid that crosses the membrane, the glomerular membrane, and it carries with it sodium. And any fluid that carries sodium with it is, by definition, considered volume. So we know that the urine output is composed of two things. Urine output is composed of volume and is composed of free water. We want to know the proportion of each. So let's solve for A, and that's simple. We'll just make this equation rearranged. So we know A is going to equal times the urine output divided by the concentration of sodium in the serum. Now we'll get A because we know these three entities. When we get A, what do we do with it? Well, A is not the free water clearance. A represents the amount of the urine output that is volume. Well, if you know what percent of the urine output is volume, or what amount is volume, then you know that the urine output minus that quantity is going to equal the free water. And that's what we have here. And that's a simple way of calculating the free water clearance. If you know the urine output and you know the volume, then you know that the difference is the free water. So, you can do a simple proportion and say the following, that whatever you get for A, let's change that again. Whatever you get for A divided by the urine output, and that quantity is going to be deducted by 1, that's going to equal your free water. And so you can use this percent, 1 minus A divided by urine output, on a daily basis to determine what quantity, what percent of the urine output a patient is making is simply free water. And then you can guide a patient who has a problem with water to say, well, this is how much free water your kidneys can excrete. Let's say 50% or 60% of your total urine output. You can use that estimate to tell a patient that this is how much water you can drink in the course of a day. So this is a very simple but helpful way of calculating free water and guiding a patient who has a problem with water balance. Now, there are more complicated equations that describe the free water clearance, and they're usually complicated because they add a lot more solutes than just sodium, both on the serum side and the urine side. But for our purposes, this is a very simple calculation that lets us determine how much free water a patient can urinate. Thank you very much.